Hi folks, and welcome to the official A Bunch of Punts podcast. This is the official episode number 7. Danny has nearly been cast out for messing up the number of episodes and providing me with the wrong numbers last week. Again, thank you very much for joining us. As mentioned on last week's podcast, episode number 6, for episode number 7, we're going to be looking at wide receiver contracts across the league. Before we get into that, I'll want to introduce you to my partners in crime this evening. Danzo, how are we, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Good.
Another exciting week in New Orleans and for the Saints. Anything happening over that direction?
Not very much at all.
Nothing at all. Burnsy, you've just joined us after your 3-course meal, chicken and chorizo, flatbread wrap with, what kind of sauce was it?
It's just a bit of sriracha on there, mate. Nothing exciting.
Nothing too exciting. And a wee side of sticky toffee pudding to dust that off, mate. Thanks for joining us. And John, mate, you've got the number 7 hanging up there. I know that's a number that's important to you, not just for the Steelers, but for Celtic as well, mate. How's your week been?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. Seen some interesting training warm-ups in the Steelers training camp with punch bags on the end of sticks and stuff like that, or boxing gloves on the end of sticks. And pretty interesting stuff.
I mean, if the Super Bowl was based on how good you were at boxing or holding onto a ball while boxing, the Steelers might have a chance this year. But unfortunately for the Steelers, it's about throwing it downfield, and Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, the best at that. I don't know. The season will unfold and tell us. Boys, thanks very much for joining me this evening. Thank you. So on to some news. This week, CMC, Christian McCaffrey, as he's otherwise known, has signed a new 2-year deal with the 49ers. Offensive Player of the Year last year. He's the highest paid running back. He'd already set that market last year, or his last deal, sorry. But he signed another $19 million per year deal there with the 49ers. Burnsy, he has been absolutely electric, not just since he signed with the 49ers. I think that's certainly brought the best out of him. But even thinking back to his Carolina Panthers days, he was absolutely setting the league on fire. What's your thoughts on CMC getting paid again in another 2 years in Santa Clara?
Look, he's been paid, but when you look at the money compared to the other contracts that we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, it's nothing for the best player possibly in the league outside the quarterback position. You're paying him, $12 million guaranteed each year. For him, a guy that's capable of giving you 1,000 yards in the ground, 1,000 yards in the air. I mean, what more do you want?
It is astonishing, isn't it, when you see it against some of the wide receiver contracts that we'll come on to, or the rumoured numbers that we've seen. For a guy that was being talked about as an MVP candidate last year, there in San Francisco. Danny, what's your initial thoughts on that deal?
It's a good contract for him. Burnsy's right. It just shows you how devalued the running back position is becoming in terms of contracts. It's becoming tough for them. I think that's fallen down to the brutality of their position, really, and how often they can get injured and how short their careers are in that position. But yeah, it's good that he's got the best money he can get. So yeah, all on him. Cheat code strikes again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, John, just to kind of give you some insight into that as well, you've had Josh Jacobs at the Packers, Saquon Barkley, both signing deals and free agency, respectively. That's where guys get a lot of money, it tends to be, and it's still nowhere near what CMC's got. What's your thoughts on that kind of the difference between what wide receivers are getting paid and what guys like Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, etc., what they're not getting paid?
I think there's a lot of stuff I read during the end of last season story around about just the valuation of running backs in general and the value that they're adding to the game overall. And I think it's just because defences are getting so good and the level of athleticism across the teams now makes it a really, really hard type of game to play. You've got to get everything absolutely spot on. And I think that's why that's probably happening. I think back to Steelers were famous for their run game in the 70s, and they just grinded out results. You probably aren't going to get that again in the modern game. You know, the ball goes in the air so much more. But in terms of CMC's stats, 14 touchdowns last year. You know, I think he would have played like 16, 17 games to contribute 14 touchdowns over that period of time. And it's not the first time he's done it. In 2019 with the Panthers, he put up 15 touchdowns. and his yards last year, 1,459 yards. So he deserves a big contract. But to your point, I just wonder if that's the evolution of the sport, that the running back position's just not contributing as much what it maybe done in the past.
Well, it just shows you. I'm looking at running back contracts just now. Alvin Kamara is the second highest paid running back, and he signed his contract 4 years ago.
Wow.
So it just shows you that it's devalued over the last few years, and I think Kamara got in at the right time by the looks of it.
Yeah,
it's probably a good one for the 49ers have been clever about it. They gave him a 2-year deal there, and like you said, Alvin Kamara's was over 5 years, and Alvin Kamara dropped off a cliff, albeit he's had his injuries. But it's been one of those ones where he's not really got much value at the end of that contract, whereas I think 2 years works for Christian McCaffrey and it works for the 49ers as well.
A really interesting stat when you look at the running backs' contracts is the amount of guaranteed money is very low. If you look at it, comparison to the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, the guaranteed element of their contracts usually quite significant. But just looking through the stats here, that's obviously an indication of the position and the injury risk to each player. They're not going to get caught up in a situation where they're having to pay people that aren't going to play for them.
It's a position that, I mean, almost every snap you're taking a hit. So, I mean, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, no surprise to see they two at the top of that tree. 2 yards after catch and after the run in monsters, probably hundreds of missed tackles, and their forced missed tackles in there as well between the two guys. But we're not here to talk about running backs. We're here to talk about wide receivers. And before we get into that, I'll hand you off to our stand-in social media man, Danzo.
Stand-in. That makes me feel good.
Superstar stand-in.
Thanks again, everybody, for engaging on the socials. We managed to hit 100 followers on TikTok this week, which is a great wee milestone for us so early on in our careers here. So anybody listening, you can find us on TikTok at A Bunch of Punts and Instagram even at A Bunch of Punts Podcast. And you'll also find us on Apple Podcast, YouTube and Spotify.
Brilliant. If anyone wants to pay us $1 million per follower over 4 years, we're not too fussy. We're not too fussy. Excellent. So, again, last week, sorry, boys, it's my fault. I argue with you all. Let's do quarterbacks first. It's the most important position on the field. And Justin Jefferson becomes the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Minutes before we go online after all our research that we've done last week, I'll take that one on the chest. That's on me, boys. I'll be the quarterback tonight. I'll put the team in my back. 140 million over 4 years, 110 million guaranteed. Bunzy, I'll come to you. This is a guy that you really rate. You're often talking about him. I remember when we took a trip up to Stirling to watch the East Kilbride Pirates play a game, and he was the talk of the car journey, both up and down. Talk to me a little bit about the deal that Justin Jefferson's got, and just how historic it is in terms of the kind of NFL going forward.
I mean, like you say, mate, he's the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of the sport. I think that probably says it all. With Kirk Cousins moving on from the Vikings as well, he's going to be the face of the franchise for the next kind of 3, 4, 5, even beyond that. I think he could stay there for a while if it works out with JJ McCarthy. Like I said last week, he's one of those players that puts bums on seats, brings eyes to the screens. He's just Hollywood. He's an absolute star, and I hope that the injury he picked up last year doesn't kind of go with him, and he can move on from that. You can see it now. I think the injuries that kind of ended careers now are just kind of bumps in the road these days. So fingers crossed he gets back to his old best.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I mean, Danzo, just one thing that Bunzy mentioned there, face of the franchise. Is this guy maybe perhaps the face of the league now at the moment?
Quite possibly. I mean, as far as star potential, he's certainly creeping up there with your Mahomes of the world, who the NFL rely on to be the face. Yeah, he's fantastic contract for him. Definitely well due, I think. He is the best in the league just now for his position. There's no doubt about it. The way he gets up and catches balls, there's so much elegance and strength. It's phenomenal. And yeah, it set the tone for the rest of them coming up behind. So let's see what happens from here on in.
Absolutely, and I mean, he's a guy you also traded for in fantasy football last year as well. Didn't work out too well considering his injury, but again, a guy that should be high on everyone's list going into next year, in my opinion. John, the Steelers, the Vikings, they've got two quarterbacks on the roster. I mean, all teams have quarterbacks on the roster, but two potential guys that can really go and make the job their own. You've got Sam Darnold, you've got JJ McCarthy. Who do you think will kind of take the reins this season? There's been a lot of talk about Sam Darnold having this season, or maybe just some bedding in time for JJ McCarthy. But what's your opinion on
it? I haven't given it a huge amount of thought, to be honest with you, Lewis. I think when we did our draft picks, I thought that the level of activity around about JJ McCarthy and the rankings and the talk and the press conference before it, that was their guy, and they were ready to kind of move things around to make sure they could get him. So it bodes well for him in terms of the faith that the team have put behind him. I don't know. I don't know who will be in there first. I'm not sure. It's something I've really looked at a huge amount since the draft has been made. But you don't go and get a quarterback that high up in the draft without a view of him coming in pretty soon. So yeah, we'll just need to see how it plays out.
I don't think he starts the start of the season, JJ McCarthy. I think Sam Darnold probably plays the first few games and then he's going to drop an absolute stinker week 4, week 5, and the crowd's going to be chanting JJ's name from the sidelines. I think that's how that's going to play out.
Sam Darnold will drop a stinker in the fourth play of the first game.
I know, I'm trying to be generous though.
I mean, Sam Darnold's had a tough time at the Jets. It wasn't really a place that was suitable for him to go and kind of really be successful for the type of quarterback that he is. I mean, again, we talk about how bad the NFL can be at evaluating young quarterbacks, and you need to remember a lot of these guys coming to their peak and their kind of later years working with the same head coach, same offensive coordinator, after having some success and having some successful teams around them and experience around them. Where did they go after that? Was it Carolina?
Yeah.
Went to the Panthers. Again, were they set up for any sort of success? Probably not. And then he went to the 49ers last year, and probably the hope when Kevin McConnell, obviously, again, who's been good for the quarterbacks that have went to Minnesota. Hopefully the hope there is that he's maybe learned something in Kyle Shanahan's offense. I mean, an offense that's there to kind of bring the best out in your quarterback, really, isn't it? And the kind of stars around him. Hopefully giving him a guy like JJ McCarthy, a safe pair of hands out the backfield with Aaron Jones now in Minnesota. Still doesn't feel right saying that. But and some guys around there like Jordan Addison. I think there's maybe some concerns around TJ Hawkinson in terms of an injury as well. But I mean, the Vikings have got some decent playmakers out there. There as well. If it was up to me, if it was my decision, do you maybe probably kind of try and bed JJ McCarthy in and let Sam Darnold kind of run the offense with a bit more experience under his belt and give him the year, promise to give him the year, and then bring JJ McCarthy in? That's probably the way I'd go. But I mean, those three guys that I've mentioned, Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy, Kevin O'Connor, they'll be delighted to see this guy get his bag, as he was often talking about at the NFL draft and the build up to that. He was looking to get paid. So again, absolutely brilliant for the league to see the stars getting paid. And again, as much as I love it when Jair Alexander locks him down, does the griddy on him, when he's blocked the pass, he's very exciting for the league, and absolutely one of the faces of the league, and of course of his franchise now, that he's signed. Before I move on and we talk about the other guys, and he's the most recent wide receiver to sign his this deal, and obviously it's historic. This is probably where you kind of really see these contracts start to kind of set the tone for the rest of the guys. And there's some guys that haven't signed. We're going to talk about some guys that have signed to kind of try and give you some sort of indication where these guys might be trying to pitch themselves. But a quick question for you boys, just a quick answer. Don't be thinking too much about it. That's $35 million dollars per year on average for Justin Jefferson. Do you know who the last player that was earning 34 million a year that was a non-quarterback? Do you know who that player was?
Good question.
Quarterback.
Non-quarterback.
I'd pitch it OBJ.
OBJ, right? Okay. Buns it.
I'm going to go a bit left field here, mate. I'm just going to go with. Did Michael Thomas get paid, Danzo?
He did, but it wasn't 30 odd million. I think it was mid-20s, I think.
John, hazard a guess, mate.
I mean, this is a bit mental, but I'm just thinking because he had such a good partnership with Tom Brady. Was it Gronkowski? Can you get his name out there?
Gronk. I always just say Gronk, mate. Much easier. No, it was not. It was actually Nick Bosa.
Okay.
Fair enough.
34 million a year. So he got his bag very recently as well. So it's not too long ago. But just interesting to see where teams value the positions after quarterback, isn't it? And I mean, he's an absolute monster, isn't he? A game wrecker there as well. Brilliant. If we stay in the NFC North, a guy that won me my fantasy championship, never going to stop talking about it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bonzi, he must have caught a few touchdowns on your team that season. 77 million guaranteed. It was a 4-year deal, 120 million overall. We've talked about these guys before and gave a little bit of our insight into that. But again, just when you think of these numbers and comparing it to Jefferson's, thinking about Amon-Ra St. Brown, do you think it's a contract that's shown value? Do you think the Lions have been right to kind of get in and get that done alongside Goff and some others?
Yeah, I would say so. I think when you think about it and you look at the kind of stats he put up last season, it's probably pretty decent value. He put up, was it 1,500 yards? I can't remember how many touchdowns. I think it was 10. To get in and pay him $5 million less a year than Justin Jefferson, I think it's probably about right. Like you say, he's probably one of the top, questionably one of the top 5 receivers in the league, and he's getting paid. Is he third highest paid now? I think it's great value, and I think it's a great person to have in the Lions team to help kind of bring the rookies along as well. He's still only 25, so he's got a lot of kind of life left in him. So I think it's a great signing.
Absolutely. Was he, just quickly, would he have been the same draft class as Justin Jefferson?
I think so, mate. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah,
possibly. I think so.
Interesting. Because he went quite late, didn't he? There was that thing on Twitter where he named every wide receiver that went off the board before him. Danzo, we kind of touched on this very, very slightly, but when these contracts were done, but the Lions now having paid Penny Sewell, Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, they're surely looking at Super Bowl or bust now in terms of these contracts that they've paid out. It needs to be now or never almost for this Lions team.
Yeah, that's what kind of excites me about the Lions just now. They feel to me, take away your Eagles and your 49ers, they're the next up and coming team for me that are properly setting up for a Super Bowl run. Possibly not this year, will be their year, maybe, I think maybe next year. But they've got these guys all lined up now. They've got the core team there. They've got them all signed in good deals. Super Bowl or bust for them soon.
I'm going to disagree with you, mate. I think when you look at the cap space that the Lions have, they've still got the third most cap space out of any team in the NFL. All their players, I mean, if you take Jared Goff, all their weapons are still young as well. You've got Jameson Williams on a rookie contract, Jahmyr Gibbs on a rookie contract, Amon-Ra St. Brown 25, a lot of the kind of defensive players on the ball, Brian Branch on a rookie contract. Like, you're looking at these guys and you're thinking this could be, I'm trying to find the way to put it, they could be a powerhouse for the next kind of 5 years. Obviously it's a difficult division they're in, but if they can hold their own in the division, like, I don't think it's Super Bowl bust. I think they're going to be one of the teams to beat for the next 5 years.
The reason I say that though is because the other teams round about them are still so good. The 49ers, your Eagles, they're going to be hard to knock off. That position in there is kind of top 2, 3, and that's not even mentioning the Chiefs in there who are in a dynasty run. You know what I mean? To break through them is going to be tough. If they break through them, yes, 100%, I agree with you. You need to get through that first though.
I think when I'm suggesting Super Bowl or bust, that's me. It's put those words into your mouth there, Danzo. The talent that's on that Lions roster, it all has to get paid at some point, and they all have to stay fit and healthy. Touch wood. But that's the benefit of having guys with extreme talent on rookie contracts is you can pay guys like Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, because if you don't have the cap space, I suppose that's where those guys have to then look elsewhere to get paid potentially what Justin Jefferson's been paid in terms of those types of positions. Granted, they've got quite a lot of cap space. I don't know if that still includes some of the rookies that they've got to maybe sign up this year as well. And you might see some more guys there as well come along, but it's almost like a now or never, isn't it? Because when you go and draft an Amon-Ra St. Brown, if you're not drafting particularly high up, the quality of these guys not necessarily ticks away, but they almost their ceiling and their floor starts to get bigger, doesn't it? In terms of the less potential these guys are, or when they come out of college, the less potential it looks like they've got. If you understand where I'm going with that there as well, so that's what I'm thinking along the lines of it needs to be now, not now or never, but in the next, the clock's starting ticking on the Super Bowl run for these guys.
Well, looking at their 2026 cap space, so it's given these rookies last year, this year, and another couple of years. The Lions are actually like 23rd in cap space available in 2026 already, and that's without changes that are going to happen. So you can see the decrease in their cap space coming. Do you know what I mean? So that's why they need to get these guys now and make that run before these rookies start looking for their deals and things like that, because that's when things start moving and you start losing pieces of your puzzle and it becomes hard then.
Yeah, John, on you go.
I was just going to chip in with a couple of points. I think the Lions fan base and their club is, and culturally their club is a blue collar organisation, you know, and I think they've got two of the highest paid players in those positions now in terms of their quarterback and their wide receiver. And I just think that when that's the culture of your club and your organisation, and then you're ready to put such a big paycheck between two people, I also think that's got to start to pay off, because I can see that fan base turning quite quickly if they start to be a little bit, hang on, you guys are earning money way beyond anything we'd ever dream about, taking it from our franchise and not delivering on it. So I can kind of see where that comes from. To the point about justifying his contract, but St. Brown's stats, I looked at before our catch up today. He has the best of all those quarterbacks with the contracts either renewed or up for renewal. He's got a 59% touchdown ratio from games played throughout his career. So 49 games played and 29 touchdowns, which is phenomenal, you know. Yeah. So more than a touchdown every second game. And if you're talking about guys that can make games for you and win games for you, then they're the ones that deserve to get paid. So I definitely see it being justified in that sense.
Absolutely. I'm just looking at Sam Laporta's deal, and they're going to have to pay that dude a lot of money. If he has a year like he did last year, there as well. Brilliant. AJ Brown, another guy that's that signed his deal. We're kind of tuck him in alongside his teammate Devonta Smith. Obviously, those guys signed really, really interesting deals. Obviously, AJ Brown was the highest paid wide receiver at his position thereafter in terms of total value going forward. In terms of his average per year, going forward. And then Devonta Smith kind of notched his way up there with a cracking deal as well coming in. I suppose my point on this was the Eagles were early in paying those guys. It's probably worked to their benefit, because as we're going to come on to kind of guys in their division as well, like a CD Lamb, AJ Brown has to fancy himself up there in terms of getting these contracts. And although he's getting a kind of $84 million guaranteed, $32 million average a year over his deal, he must be looking at it now thinking a couple of weeks later, he might have been looking at something a little bit more healthier. Now, I suppose for those guys, they're probably not, they maybe not think like that, they maybe just think like that was the best deal for me at the time. But both of those guys, the Eagles are probably the biggest beneficiaries there to keep two very, very talented wide receivers on the roster for an extra number of years, but maybe not feeling the tightness of the purse strings as maybe the Vikings are. I know the Vikings will be happy with keeping Justin Jefferson, but I mean, if they could have paid him less, I'm sure they would have.
Definitely, yeah. I think they've worked out well, and I think the Eagles have probably looked at it and seen it coming, really, and knew that if they didn't get in early, they were going to have to pay even bigger than what they actually did. But at the same time, I think they've also done well for their players as well. They've done well for AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, who they've set them in and about, basically, to say, listen, no, we're going to save ourselves a bit of money here, but we're also going to pay you. Don't get this wrong. We're going to be fair, and it's worked out to everybody's benefit, to be honest with you. I've seen a few online saying that Smith's deal doesn't look so great now, even signed it too early, etc. But I think Devontae Smith knows where he is in the league, where he is in kind of rankings, and I think he's got a cracking deal for where he is at this moment, and it's out for him now to go and prove that he needs more. You know what I mean? So I think this year's going to be a huge year for Devontae Smith, and good luck to him.
Absolutely. I think sometimes as well with those guys, maybe I don't want to say detrimental to them, but almost sometimes the style of play with the Eagles in terms of how run heavy they were and having quarterbacks that obviously having Jalen Hurts on it, and then we had the whole palaver around the tush push, wasn't it? Right? Sometimes the guys suffer in terms of maybe when it comes to the stats. When it comes to kind of building these contracts in terms of how important they are to the team. And I mean, you've got Saquon Barkley, and obviously we're not here to talk about running backs, but he's signed for the Eagles, and he's a guy that's going to want some passes this season. He's not going to want to just run it, and he'll probably be thinking about the same about Jalen Hurts in terms of him running the ball from the 1 yard line. I think Saquon Barkley will take offence if he's not getting those ones, but I suppose that's the benefit of having a great team for the team overall. But maybe when it comes to these deals, when you try to back yourself up when it comes to total yards and receptions and touchdowns, if you've got quarterbacks and running backs that are willing to run the ball and take some yards off you that way, it can be detrimental there as well. If we stick on the kind of wide receiver twos as we refer to them, I know these guys won't think of themselves like that, but Bunzy, if I come to you, Jalen Waddle out in Miami, if you're looking at his deal now, that's a guy that's done extremely well. Now, we don't want to talk about it too much because that does come into the planning for the Dolphins in terms of, we spoke about last week in terms of Tua. But I mean, 84 million, 76 guaranteed. Jalen Waddle must be laughing his way to the bank now and down in Miami.
Look, all the best for Jalen Waddle. He's done amazing. But when you look at the players around him that are getting paid less, you're overpaid. Is strong, but he's definitely worked a really great deal for himself, is how I'd put it. He's getting paid more than the likes of Devontae Adams. I know Devontae Adams is 32, Cooper Kupp at 31, but he's getting paid more than Devontae Smith, and I think they've probably had pretty similar outputs as well. Nico Collins.
Yeah.
Then you get to DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, two players that are proper wide receiver ones, and he's getting paid more than them. Like, fair play to him, but I don't know what Miami's plan is, if they're just trying to build for the future. I mean, I know Tyreek he's 30, isn't he? So, I don't really know what to make of it. It's just a funny money contract for a wide receiver too, isn't it?
Danzo, any thoughts?
I think, from Miami's point of view, I think they class Waddle in with Devontae Smith. To be honest, I think they have them as similar type of players with their output, where their standing is within the team is probably wide receiver too. But top of the game wide receiver twos. It can quite easily slot in as wide receiver ones if there's any injuries and things like that, and take on that kind of target sharing, that responsibility within the team. But yeah, I agree with Burns. He's worked a fantastic deal for himself. It feels like a lot of money for where he is just now within his career and what he's already done in his career. But again, same as Smith, who signed the deal. They're both about the same age, same kind of area. Let him crack on. Let him prove he's worth that deal.
Absolutely, John. I'll come to you. You're a finance guy. Is there tax in Florida? Is there tax in Miami? Is that not one of the best places to be?
Couldn't even tell you, mate. I couldn't tell you. It's not something that I know you need to worry about that often because you've got your guys sorting you out that way. But I'm not sure, mate. I think that my thoughts here is that the wide receiver 2 marketplace is the one that's the biggest shock just now, or most up in the air. I think for a point in last week's call around about how big a contract teams deserve, it all comes down to how much do they carry that team. And I think Justin Jefferson carries the Vikings. I think actually to your point around about who the first quarterback would be, I'm still thinking about it. In terms of JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold, probably doesn't really matter. I think even I would do all right at throwing the ball, Justin Jefferson, and I can't really throw it that far. So he deserves that. I think the wide receiver 2 position is vital to be a successful team, even just for a different type of wide receiver, slot receivers, etc., and giving your offense a different playbook. But it's just how valuable are they? And I think that's the whole conundrum right now. And you look at some of the guys that haven't got signed up yet, that's probably still the position they're in. I think Jalen Waddle's done fantastically well with that contract. Again, just looking at that stat that I looked at before the call tonight, he's played 47 career games and had 18 touchdowns, so 38% conversion. He's the lowest conversion out of all these guys that we're looking at tonight from a games played to touchdown ratio. But the Dolphins obviously really value that wide receiver 2 and absolutely making sure that they've got him in there. So it's
I think that's the problem with your start there, John. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah, no worries.
Your start's a great start, but when you get Tyreek Hill in front of you, it
Totally.
kind of outweighs all of that. Do you know what I mean? Because he is going to grab all that target sharing, and the amount of touchdowns Tyreek Hill scored in that time is unbelievable. And then you take into what the running backs did last year for Miami and the amount of touchdowns they took. It kind of makes it an unfair comparison, but at the same time, it's still a great start, and it's a great way of putting that with these guys' contracts coming up to say, no, this is how effective they actually have been.
Like you say, sorry, John, for every kind of stat that Tyreek Hill might kind of muddy, he does the same for other stats as well. So like I said last week, Jalen Waddle had the most yards per catch last season. Does that make him the best wide receiver in the league? But you can only look at stats so much, I think, and he just doesn't really pass the eye test for me to be a wide receiver one.
I think the thing for that stat for me, the reason I put it in there, you're absolutely spot on. Like, you can always spin a stat to make your argument, can't you? That's the reality of them. Tyreek Hill just, out of interest, 124 career games and 76 touchdowns, more than anyone on this list here. But my point here is, could someone else come in and make a similar contribution for £76 million guaranteed a year? And that's where you're trying to balance that worth and understand whether is that worth it, or could they pick someone else up for less cap space?
It's so relative, absolutely. And I think it's an interesting start, definitely, because I think if you go and put him on a team that has absolutely no wide receivers and he becomes wide receiver number 1, then you see that he's kind of true value, don't you? I think that's what that's alluding to. And I mean, again, we spoke about too early in the league in passing yards last year, and then we had in brackets, well, potentially Tyreek Hill led the league in that start there as well. But it's all relative for these guys, isn't it? And that's what you're saying, John. It's what you're getting for your buck, really, isn't it? In terms of when it comes to the performance aspect of it, and maybe that's where the incentives come in for these guys, isn't it? To make up the full value of their contract. Is it based on receptions, touchdowns, etc., etc.? And to some point, effectively these guys can only affect it so much, because at the end of the day there's a play call, isn't there? And they play calls have intended targets. I mean, like you say, if we're all standing on the sideline, game on the line, are you going to throw it to Jalen Waddle, or are you going to throw it to Tyreek Hill? You know, it's if the decision's in your hands, you know where you're going with the ball. But I suppose the reason that's pretty interesting is you've got guys that in a similar bracket to those guys that I want to say, like your Nico Collins and like your T Higgins, who we'll come on to, that I found themselves in completely different situations. And if we start off with T Higgins, obviously this was a situation that looked like it was going bad for both the player and the Bengals. Obviously the Bengals losing a top wide receiver talent. T Higgins requesting a trade to move away from Cincinnati, but over time it looks like it's been resolved. He's had some injury concerns, I suppose, T Higgins, as well as a lot of these guys have in terms of the intensity and the quick changes of speed and pace along the field. I mean, I don't think there's many on this list that have maybe played the full amount of games. I know when we come on to Ayuk, etc., he missed some games for my fantasy team last year. Jalen Waddle also missed some games for my fantasy team last year. So thinking about those guys, if we think about T Higgins first and foremost, he's been franchise tag. He's going to play under the tag this year. It's kind of, they've came to that agreement. It's 21.8 million guaranteed. So in terms of that, I mean, it's not a disaster for T Higgins when you kind of look at it on that basis. But then again, when you look at guys like Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, where they've been able to get an agreement with the team, both the team and the player are kind of winning out there, isn't it?
Definitely.
Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think it's worked out, and I think we spoke about it briefly before we came on there, but the new deals have created a resolution to that problem. I think with the money he's getting now on the franchise tag, that money puts him in with Stephon Diggs. Do you know what I mean? That's a good place for T Higgins, being essentially wide receiver two, and that everybody knows Chase is the top man in there, and he's the potential to be the top man in the whole of the league up there with Jefferson, and his time will come. But yeah, I think it's kind of made a resolution for them without having to do anything really, and it's kind of worked out. Coming off that tag, it's going to be a different story, and they'll probably be back in the same position or similar position next year, but they still have the option to tag him next year as well, I think. So it's going to be a tough one for them to work out, but yeah, resolution sorted. That I think that'll get signed very soon, and they'll just carry on like we did, and hopefully Burrow's fit enough to push them up again, because I like the way they're my kind of second team, the Bengals. I just love the whole attitude and the way they play and everything. It just brings a smile to my face watching them.
Let's be honest, everybody loves a bit of Joey Burrow, don't they? But it's a nice segue there. Bunzy, is T Higgins maybe a casualty of Joey Burrow getting paid crazy amounts in the quarterback position, and then Jamar Chase? I mean, you seen that awful interview with Jamar Chase in the locker room where he was getting asked, like, why don't you take less money and then T Higgins can stay? And he's a bit like, well, hold on a minute. Which is interesting. I wonder if you would do that for one of your colleagues. Bunzy, take out.
No, you're selling me anyway. Maybe put some of Danzo, but mate, having a look at it, obviously missed a few games last season. Joe Burrow missed a few games last season, so his production decreased. Having a look, he's a perennial 1,000-yard receiver. That's how I'd probably kind of pigeonhole him. And when I think about guys in the league that are like that, Mike Evans is probably another one, and he's getting paid just about the same amount of money as Mike Evans, and I think that's about right. I think the Bengals need to be careful having a look, like you say, with the money they spend on Joe Burrow, but not only that, having a look further forward and having a look at how much they're going to have to pay Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase is going to be wanting a similar contract to Justin Jefferson. And we need to see how that pans out, kind of cap space wise as well. They're pretty middle of the pack to be honest. So I think they if they wanted to pay T Higgins, I think they could have. They've just chose not to because I don't think they see the value in it.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think that kind of covers the point for T Higgins. There's a couple of other guys that were kind of on the fringes of things that I wanted to cover off. Obviously, Nico Collins found himself with a pretty decent deal. Some brilliant options for CJ Stroud going forward this year in terms of three top wide receivers, and we kind of touched on that last week with obviously Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. Similar guys there as well, with Keenan Allen obviously signing for the Bears in free agency, kind of 20 million a year in average in terms of his deal. Calvin Ridley, 23 million, obviously leaving the Jags to head out to Tennessee there as well. So there's you kind of put those guys in that kind of similar category, wouldn't you? Maybe some are maybe done a little bit better than others in terms of that free agency aspect, but nothing wildly that's kind of blowing you away for those guys that are on the kind of periphery there as well. I suppose what I wanted to talk about and spend the most time on for today's podcast was number 88, CD Lamb. I mean, I'll be honest, before the playoffs, that was a guy that was keeping me up all night. The thought of him tearing down the sideline against the Packers. Thankfully, it didn't work out that way in the end. But that's a guy that must keep defensive coordinators up all night in terms of his situation. And then obviously John's had this love affair with Brandon Ayuk and George Pickens. He doesn't know who he wants there as well. But Brandon Ayuk's another guy again who was absolutely electric at points in the season. Had his injuries as well. Granted, nothing too serious, but these are both these guys are probably the top of the league now in terms of where do they fit in this Justin Jefferson and the rest pecking order that we've covered off. If I start off with CD Lamb, Danzo, you're Jerry Jones, okay? How do you sign CD Lamb, pay him, but tell him he's not as good as Justin Jefferson and he's getting paid less?
I don't think that happens, but I think you slot him in right behind Justin Jefferson. We all love the ego that comes with it in these positions. CD Lamb's got it. He's proved it. He's went out and had class-leading stats last year for £3.5 million. He's now saying, right, I've done it. I'm going to do it again, and you're going to pay me for it this time, which he's got every right to do. Do you know what I mean? It's just, see, for the Cowboys, he's a star. He's a man in there. For the Cowboys to be the team that they want to be, they need to sign him, and they need to give him that money. I mean, if you put him in and give him 10,000 more than Justin Jefferson, is he going to be angry just to get him that number one? Do you know what I mean? Let's do it. But yeah, he's definitely in and about there, and he's proved his worth, to be honest, for them. And they need to pay him. It's as simple as that. And they've got, we said it before, they've got nobody else round about there in their offensive weapons that are even anywhere near the same ballpark as what CD Lamb is. So they've got to get him, or they're going to really struggle over the next few years.
Before anyone else jumps in, I do want to touch on that. Like, I fucking love the pettiness when it comes to these contracts. So obviously before AJ Brown and Justin Jefferson, before Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill's total value in his contract was 120 million, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown signed 120 million and £10,000. So just like that little, I just want that wee nudge above these guys. Is so petty. I think it actually happened with David Bakhtiari, didn't it? But I think it was like $500 or $1,000 they done. I can't remember who it was that signed, but he kind of put the salute out to him when he seen the deal being signed on Twitter, just laughing like how petty is it? It's hilarious. But again, is this where the Eagles have kind of done really well in terms of going in early? Because I mean, if AJ Brown still hadn't been paid, is AJ Brown then looking to get his contract a little bit closer to that 110 million that Justin Jefferson's just signed? Because just in Dallas right now, it just feels like a total bin fire, doesn't it? You've still got Dak to pay. Do you pay Dak? Do you not pay Dak? Who do you play if you don't pay Dak? and then you've got CD Lamb here sitting, having not turned up to OTAs, and Justin Jefferson's just signed 140 million. Jerry Jones must go, what is going on here? It's brilliant. I love it. John Burnsy, what's your thoughts on this?
I think to sort of your point around about the Eagles wide receivers and their contracts, I think the key difference is that elite wide receiver seems to be getting 4 years on their deal. So I think that would be the biggest disappointment, just going back to our point earlier on around about injuries and different things that can happen in your career. So those guys seem to have just been got, okay, the money's more as well, but actually the guarantee of an extra year and some more in terms of signing on bonuses, that's going to, I think that's going to be something that both of them will be pretty disappointed that they've maybe dealt in too early. Just looking around the league, to your point earlier on about pettiness as well, I would be really disappointed. I think more so with AJ Brown, I think what he's done since he's came in has been phenomenal. And you just need to look at their winning record over that period of time as well, 11-6, 14-3 in the 2 years that he's been wide receiver one. So he's absolutely vital to it. But CD Lamb is much more vital to the Cowboys than Dak Prescott is. And I think when we were chatting about his contract last week, I think you've got to prioritise CD Lamb ahead of Dak Prescott whenever you're writing up that contract and looking at salary cap, which is where my thoughts would be in terms of the Cowboys are looking at. Burnsy, I don't know if you're
totally agree, mate. I think I touched on it last week as well. The problems that the Cowboys have been going on for the past kind of 5 years now, I would say, and it's been bubbling under the surface, and I think it's got the potential to absolutely erupt, and it's just going to be an absolute tire fire this time next year when Dak's wanting paid, CD Lamb's wanting paid, and they just don't have the money to do it. They've got nothing behind CD Lamb as well. We've got Brandon Cooks, who doesn't really do a lot these days. And look, I don't know how they've got themselves into this cap space kind of hell that they're in, where they can't pay everybody because they don't have a lot on the offensive side of the ball, really. But yeah, I think this time next season it could be a scary time for the Cowboys fans.
Absolutely.
You know what I can't believe? Sorry, just before you move on, and it goes back to what we were chatting about last week about the rookies' contracts, is the fact that there's rookies coming in the league and never thrown a ball at this level getting paid more than CD Lamb. Yeah. That's where it goes back to your point last week, Danny. It does make you go, it doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
You know? Exactly. But yeah, crazy stuff.
Before we move on to Brandon Ayuk and John, I'll get your thoughts on him. The Titans obviously traded away AJ Brown to the Eagles. They drafted Treylon Burks, who's now working for a place on special teams. They must be kicking themselves as well at the thought of that. And he was quite disappointed to be traded away as well, if I do remember correctly, at the time, AJ Brown. But I mean, he's made them pay for it in more ways than once. But again, another casualty of that is they have to go out and spend $23 million on Calvin Ridley, who's a guy that's, I mean, he's done really well to get that contract in my opinion, but we'll see how that works out there as well. Again, it just comes to try to evaluate these guys when they come out of the draft. You just never know what they're going to give you. Brandon Ayuk then, John, he's in a bit of a different situation to CD Lamb. Most people on the 49ers have been getting paid. We talked about Bosa, we talked about CMC earlier. They've signed a wide receiver in the first round of the draft and Ricky Pearsall. Again, a guy that's not turned up to OTAs. There's cap space there in the 49ers in the immediate future. Is there enough to pay Brandon Ayuk? I don't know. But where do you think this guy's pitching himself?
He's got to be looking at at least those second wide receiver contracts that have been handed out and think, well, if you look at my stats in comparison to a Waddle type contract, for example, I've got to be up there. That's got to be the minimum that he'll be looking at in terms of his contribution and his stats. Particularly last season, phenomenal, 1,300 odd receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. The guy's a key player, and the whole concept of having that wide receiver 2 option in there to really push a franchise on is massive. In terms of his overall situation, there was a lot of rumours that there was a trade deal on the table with a few different franchises. at the draft. Obviously, he's been linked heavily to the Steelers because I think he's Mike Tomlin's son. At least he looks like him. And apparently they were getting taken away at the last minute, which was quite strange. That's a rumour. Who knows the legitimacy of that rumour? But apparently there was a lot of decent deals that looked all good, and it was the 49ers that pulled them away at the last minute as well, which is a strange thing because it looks like everything's pointing towards them actually wanting to trade them on. I think from Ayuk's point of view, he's got to be looking at who else has the cap space to pay me. And that's where I don't think we Steelers do. I don't think they've got the cap space to be able to actually to fit him in there. They would definitely need to do some jiggery pokery to try and make it happen, which I know teams can do.
Yeah.
But I don't know where it's going to end. If you're talking about just the player as in general, I think he's phenomenal. I'd love to see him in the black and gold next season, but I think he'll probably stay at the 49ers and maybe look to try and move on thereafter.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? The jiggery pokery is probably the best way to describe how people muck about with the cap, because it can be done. Absolutely, there'll be a casualty somewhere, but it's normally the future of the team that kind of gives way there. Danzo, Bunzy, any thoughts on Ayuk?
Well, sorry, Bunzy. To me, it's all posturing, and it's coming from Ayuk. He's just trying to get the best deal he possibly can, and he's running it right to the limit. We've seen it before. Rumours say he's looking for 30 million. I've heard in the last couple of days that the 49ers have offered 26. It's not a million miles away, and like I say, that's why I say it's posturing. He's seen what these other guys are getting. He's just trying to get the best deal he possibly can. Missing OTAs isn't something new either. I know they get fined for it, but it's not a new concept that happens in the NFL. A lot of players have done it in the past, so I feel like it's just a matter of time, really, before this is get done. To John's point, I don't think right now there's a very many teams that are going to pay that kind of money for Ayuk. I think he's a cracking player, but they've either signed their players up on deals or they don't have the money there to actually sign a player of his calibre. So it all feels to me as it's going to get done. It's just a matter of time when it gets done.
Yeah. Before I come to you, Bunzy, and get your thoughts, does anyone know what OTA stand for? Bonus point?
Not a clue, mate.
Put me on the spot, I forgot.
Dead easy. It's organised team activities. There you go. All these abbreviations. I think to your point, Danzo and Bunzy, I'll ask you this. I mean, you've kind of seen it with the Packers in terms of what went on with Devontae Adams, and he wanted to be highest paid wide receiver, X, Y, and Z. The Packers lowball him. He potentially goes and plays in potentially get into a tag year, etc., etc. It doesn't work out, and then you go and lose a guy who was absolutely phenomenal for the franchise. Again, for me, still one of the top talents in the wide receiver position. Just lacking any sort of stable quarterback play or decent quarterback playing there as well. But do the 49ers really want to see that happen with Ayuk, or do you think when you think of George Kittle, Debo, CMC, Ricky Pearsall, we don't know what he's going to bring in, but I mean, there's still some other guys on the 49ers that are capable of making it a Super Bowl winning offense. But he was a guy at the end of the season that did cut a frustrated figure at the end of the Super Bowl. There was that kind of shot on his face, wasn't it, in terms of being openly upset and frustrated with how the game went, which is normal for a superstar athlete on the biggest stage. But what's your thought there? Is that someone the 49ers want to see go?
I'm not sure. I think from his production point of view, mate, I think yes, they will be just upset about it if he does go, because he's not even. I think this is the difficulty with where do you peg Brandon Ayuk, because 1,300 yards last season, doesn't he put him as a wide receiver 2? It probably bumps him into the low end of being a wide receiver 1, like as some people put it, a wide receiver 1.5, where he's not quite that superstar top level wide receiver, but he's better than your kind of. I'd definitely say he's better than your kind of better wide receiver 2s, and back to back 1,000-yard seasons. He's showing some consistency there now for them as well, and I think there's probably. I feel if there's going to be a trade done from him, it would have been done on the draft weekend. The fact it wasn't, I think they will come to a deal, and it probably will be somewhere in that region of probably 26, 27 million, and that'll keep him there.
I suppose when you're thinking of that, CMC is probably a guy that skews the likes of Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel's stats as well. I mean, you even had Deebo Samuel rushing the ball for long periods of time there in San Francisco, because it is an offense that's so fluid. It's just whether or not you can value that aspect of having a guy behave like that on the team, because when these guys are missing OTAs, I mean, if they're important guys for their teams, from me looking at it from a team's perspective, one, your head coach has to then go out and deal with that in the media first day back. Like, that's just a headache you do not want as a manager, coming in. Why the fuck is CD Lamb not turned up at OTAs? Well, unfortunately, Mr. Journalist, I don't pay him. It's Jerry Jones that pays him. Like, he can't go out and say that. That's probably what he wants to say, but he can't. But then there's that aspect of how does your quarterback prepare without his number one target? How does the guy that you've just drafted, like Ricky Pearsall, how does he learn how to prepare and become a pro of guys that have been there and done that and done it consistently? So it can't be ideal for preparation for both the teams and other players on the roster, and it's whether or not you value that in terms of that, because you have had guys like Devontae Adams, like even your T Higgins this year as well, that are just saying, look, I'm on the tag, I'm going to play him, I love it here in Cincinnati. Do I wish I was getting paid 140 million? Absolutely, but am I worth it? Probably not. But they're willing to go and still play there without causing too much disruption to the teams,
I think I think it was Danny's point in terms of sometimes it is just smoke and mirrors. I think from my experience seeing at the Steelers, I remember TJ Watt was holding out for a big contract last year and he did the same. But Mike Tomlin was turning up at press conferences and I think he was going along with the pantomime of it. He knew it was just all part of the game. And even when TJ Watt was talking about it, he just, it's different than football in Europe, where if a guy does that, the fans are protesting outside and he gets booed in his first game and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think the NFL, it is part of the process. And it is a strange one. Sorry, I know you were talking about the significance of it, Lewis. I think it gets more significant the longer it goes on.
Yeah.
And that's probably the key thing, because you are right, closer it gets to kick-off and the weeks of preparation that they've got ahead of them, if that gets prolonged and it really starts to impact team preparation, then you're right, it's a coach in a really difficult position then. But I think in this early stages of the off-season, it's smoke and mirrors. From that point of view.
I think you're right, but we also need to remember this isn't training camp. Do you know what I mean? If it falls into training camp, it's a completely different story. Then you're missing out. Then you're saying, no, this stuff really needs to get sorted out, and it needs to get sorted now, because that is then your major preparation for the season. And like you say, you're looking at who's Purdy going to be thrown to and things like that. And I think Ayuk is a big part of their team because he's that AJ Brown style big burly guy that's going to get up high and catch it, which allows the other parts of their team more freedom, really. Do you know what I mean? It means that they're not just focusing on Deebo Brown when it's passing, or they're just looking for the check down to CMC, these kind of things. Do you know what I mean? He opens up that whole playbook for them while still having the ability to go up and catch a Hail Mary up in the end zone, things like that. So, yeah, I think it is, like I say, I think it'll get done, but like I say, training camp, if it affects training camp, that's when you start asking questions about the player.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask a quick question, Danny and Lewis. I seen a wee thing on Twitter earlier in the week, and it was about DK Metcalf and potential rumours of him being traded at some point. And the question was, who would you rather on a 3-year deal at that kind of 30 million a year level, Brendan Ayuk or DK Metcalf? I know your teams might have different situations, but who would you go for?
For me, it's DK
Brandon
Metcalf,
Ayuk.
and that's purely because he's proven himself for longer in the league, really, and that's it. I find them very similar type players. Do you know what I mean? They're big, powerful, they're fast, they get up well and things like that. So But yeah, just for the fact that he's done it and he's done it for longer as DK Metcalf.
I just like Ayuk. I think the different styles of players to some extent, although they do have their similarities. I think especially open up the middle of the field is where Ayuk excels. But and also touchdowns. I think I just think he's a bit more of a magnet for touchdowns as well, which probably doesn't make for good reading in the stats last year with the amount of injuries and games he missed. But like you say, open up the playbook and allowing the 49ers to kind of involve other guys and maybe again you could argue the case that Metcalf suffers because he's wide receiver number one and he's locked down, and maybe that's where guys like Tyler Lockett have had success, isn't it, in terms of finding themselves wide open for 99-yard bombs from Geno Smith. That would have been a good question if Bunze hadn't just disconnected, but we'll try to bring the Seahawks into it for him. Maybe he's got bored, we've not talked about him. But no, listen, really enjoyed that tonight, gents. That's us just hit the hour mark there as well, and I think we've kind of covered all the bases there as well. John, you had that stat there around touchdown ratios. Give us the top three then.
So out of all the this is their career touchdown ratio, and since Danny shit all over that stat, I'm not too keen on it anymore. I was quite excited about the research I'd done. So St Brown is on 59%, 49 games played and 29 touchdowns, so he's the highest. Followed by second place is AJ Brown, 77 career games and 42 touchdowns. And then I think we are at, let me just quickly see the last one. It's Justin Jefferson. So 60 career games, 30 touchdowns, 50% conversion.
So the top three guys are at the top of that tree. Maybe there's some method to the madness there, John, and Danny's not got a fucking Scooby as to what he's talking about. Brilliant. Bunze, we'll come back to you very quickly. We're going to round it up. You disconnected just as John had a question about the Seahawks, mate. John, take it away from that.
Yeah, mate, I seen a wee thing on Twitter during the week, and it was who would you rather for your team on the same contract conditions, a 3-year deal around about the £30 million a year mark, DK Metcalf or Brendan Ayuk?
DK Metcalf, I think. Not just as a Seahawks fan, I think you look at what DK Metcalf gives you, he's an absolute freak. I think you put him in a team with a competent quarterback and his production is going to be a lot better than what it has been. I'd take him over Brandon Ayuk, mate. I just think he's just an absolute freak.
We all went Ayuk, but I'm going to be finished there.
Excellent. Gents, thank you so much again for giving up some of your time this evening to talk some football. Like I say, we're going to be kind of churning out some material over the next few weeks. So if you're missing around the NFL podcast, tune in here. I suppose you're already tuned in if you're listening to me say that there as well. But like I say, thank you so much for listening. Thank you very much for the follows and the interaction on social media. You'll probably see our personal accounts reacting and replying to you as well. Again, get in touch, let us know. I know there's been a bit of feedback on the NFL London games offences that we've picked, which has been absolutely fantastic. We'll hopefully get a few more of them shared over the next few days. And knowing this, we'll get this out during the week, and CD Lamb and Brandon Ayuk will have signed new deals by the time you listen to this as well. So if that's the case, we'll be wrapping it there, and then the podcast will be done and dusted. Folks, thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll see you down the road.